Well, good Thursday evening, or Tuesday evening rather. I tried to go through this week a little bit faster. It is Tuesday, and it is a time for Hurricane Hub Live, where we talk about the tropics, what's going on through the Atlantic, the Pacific, because there's not much going on in the Atlantic. Give a little bit of trivia and talk about just everything that's going on in the tropics right here every weekday night on 13 News Now Plus at 8 o'clock. As I mentioned, quiet in the Atlantic for the next 7 days, but there are a couple of waves that we're watching out there, and they're not really expected to develop, but certainly is something to watch and something to talk about, because there hasn't been much to talk about in the Atlantic all that much here over the past couple of weeks. The Pacific remains very active. We have two named storms, a major hurricane that is south of the island of Hawaii, and all the islands of the Hawaiian island chain, and a tropical storm out there, and two other waves that have a pretty strong potential for development over the coming days. So the Pacific remains active, the Atlantic, not so much. Of course, the Atlantic hurricane season begins on June 1st, runs through November 30th, peak is September 10th, and we're just about right in here, almost August 1st. So technically, we're about 1/3 of the way through the Atlantic hurricane season as far as the time goes. But you'll notice after August 1st, that's when we really start to see the activity ramp up. So even though we're 1/3 of the way through the season, most of the activity happens right there in the middle of the season, peaking at around September 10th. So not, again, much out there right now, but there are a couple of waves that we're watching moving through parts of the Atlantic Ocean. So here's sort of the broad view. Again, some areas down here through the Intertropical Convergence Zone might sort of stand out just a little bit. And here into the Western Caribbean, we have a little trough of low pressure, really stretched from around Cuba all the way down towards Honduras, and that is working its way off towards the west right now. You can see a lot of thunderstorm activity. A lot of that has really transitioned from the trough that was back here over the Western Caribbean. Those thunderstorms are really firing up over the Yucatan Peninsula. So we're not looking at any development, even as it moves off towards the west and works its way over towards the Bay of Campeche. We're not expecting any development with this wave. Again, just something to watch. Then as we get out here into the eastern Atlantic, you can see here coming off the coast of Africa, some of these waves, and we have what we call a monsoon trough. And this, we typically see these thunderstorms fire up during the afternoon, and sometimes there's enough energy to get a little bit of a spin going up into the atmosphere. And as these waves sort of come off the coast of Africa by the Cabo Verde Islands, that's when we typically would expect to see tropical systems to develop. We're not quite to the Cabo Verde season just yet, but again, we do expect things to really start to ramp up here over the next month or so, getting closer to that peak of the Atlantic hurricane season on September 10th. So generally right now, we're not looking at any tropical development over the next 7 days. Again, some of these waves that come off the coast of Africa, they've been encountering some wind shear, keeping the storms from developing and getting that center circulation. There's still some dry air out there, some of that Saharan dust. You can notice, again, hardly any clouds here through much of the Caribbean over towards the Lesser Antilles. So no development expected over the next 7 days. That could change, though, as we get later into the first week and a half of August. Just something we'll have to wait and see. Pacific, however, totally different story. Started early, May 15th. That's the start of the Pacific hurricane season. And we saw quite a few storms here off the coast of Mexico. And things have been relatively quiet recently in the eastern Pacific, but the central Pacific has been pretty busy. We've got two storms right here, pretty much back to back. That major hurricane right there, Category 3 hurricane, and then just literally right behind it, we have a tropical storm. Now they're well south of the Hawaiian Islands, not going to impact the islands other than some swells, which certainly the surfers love there. But these storms, as you'll notice, are not all that far apart, only about 400 miles separating the two. And with this one being such a much larger storm, really robbing a lot of the energy from the second storm, the tropical storms are really not expected to develop. So this is Iona. Winds of 125 miles per hour, so a major hurricane, 735 miles south-southeast of Honolulu. Again, not going to impact the islands, but it is working its way off towards the west. Will gradually weaken as we go over the next several days. You'll notice that we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then we don't have a label there technically because it's crossing over the international date line. So the computer thinks, well, it's a totally different day and kind of confused. So that would be, you know, Sunday, 2 p.m. our time. This is all of our local time here in Eastern Virginia, North Carolina, Eastern Daylight Time. So that's the only reason why it's not plotted there, is because technically By this point, it's crossed over the international date line. It's a totally different day. Right behind it, we have Tropical Storm Keli, winds of 40 miles per hour, moving to the west at 790 miles southeast of Honolulu. Again, really following just in the path there of Iona, and that's why it's really not going to have a chance to develop, because a lot of times, you know, one tropical system robs the energy from the other. Sometimes they'll spin around each other, something we call the Fujiwara effect, but it just looks like that this storm, Keli, is going to continue to move off towards the west at 15 miles per hour and just fall apart into a tropical depression over the next 36 hours or so. Just really not in an environment conducive for maintaining its strength as it moves off towards the west. And then there are a couple other areas that we're watching out there that have that potential for development. Actually, 3 areas, 2 that are in the red. One is underneath the other. It's kind of hard to see in there. So could see another Central Pacific storm, could see another East Pacific storm. And you know about the Atlantic hurricane names that we have, but we also have the Eastern Pacific storm names: Alvin, Barbara, Cosme, Delilah, Eric, and Flossie. But you'll notice we have a couple of different names that we were talking about. We were talking about an ice storm that was not Ivo, talking about a K storm that was not Kiko. That's because the Central Pacific has a separate list of names as well. As a matter of fact, Central Pacific operates a little bit different. The Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic, you know, we have one list per year, and there's 6 lists, and you go through the list, and then, you know, you start a new list the next year. Well, in the Central Pacific, there are 4 lists of names, and here you can see Iona and Keli. Once you go through the end of the list, you just start the next list. It doesn't start over each year. So, you know, you might end the year in the Central Pacific at Iona, then you would start the next year with the P-name storm and then go through the list. So Central Pacific works a little bit different. And the World Meteorological Organization is the group that maintains all of these storm names. And that'll come up in our Hurricane Hub Live trivia question here in just a moment. But again, Central Pacific, different sets of names. We'll go back again. This is the Eastern Pacific. Those are the ones closer to the Mexican coastline. And then that's the list for the whole year. Central Pacific, you just keep on going up and down through the list. You don't start over each year. And notice that there are only about 12 names on the list, so we don't even have all the letters. And notice that most of them are Polynesian, Hawaiian names. They're in the Central Pacific. So let's talk about Hurricane Hub Live trivia from yesterday. Mentioned that Hatteras and Oregon inlets are believed to have been formed and created by a hurricane in what year? And we were looking all the way back to 1749, 1846, 1903, 1933. Well, some of those years I picked because they are important. 1749, that's when we believe actually Willoughby Spit was formed here in Hampton Roads in Norfolk. 1933, of course, the big Chesapeake Potomac hurricane that has the record for the highest storm surge, followed not far behind by Isabel, was actually 1846 that we believe that Hatteras and Oregon inlets were created by a hurricane. So hurricanes, yes, you know, they cause the flooding, they cause the destruction, but they can really reshape the land. Mentioned 1749. That's when we believe Willoughby Spit was formed. It was actually 2 hurricanes. This was one of them. And of course, now we got houses built along them. And of course, the Outer Banks, you have houses built there along the barrier islands. But again, as we've seen over the years, and even here just recently, how tropical systems and even nor'easters can, you know, reshape the barrier islands, causes, you know, inlets to be cut into the Outer Banks, pose threats to homes, and of course, pose threats to even the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, which they moved, what was it, about 20, 25, maybe 30 years ago, moved it back inland, and they're doing some rehab work on it now. So here's what it looks like for tomorrow's trivia question, something to think about tonight. I mentioned the World Meteorological Organization, that they maintain the different lists of tropical cyclone names. How many lists are there? Well, I've mentioned 3, so we know there are at least 3, and there are other bodies of water out there. So is it 7, 8, 9, or 10? I'll have that question, and I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night. So that does it for our Hurricane Hub Live tonight here on this Tuesday evening. Definitely want you to remember to scan the QR code, because you'll be able to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It has information on supplies you need to prepare for hurricane season. All kinds of great information. You can download it on your phone, sponsored by the fine folks over there at Norfolk Scope and the Norfolk Admirals. And reminding you that Hurricane Hub Live is live every weekday at 8 o'clock. And of course, later this season, I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about once the Atlantic gets a little more active.